I know each one of us has had the experience of somebody in our life that we really depend on, and then how hard it is when that person we depend on leaves us. Maybe it's somebody you've worked with for years, or could be your neighbor that you've grown to depend on, and we all know what it's like to be robbed of somebody we love when they leave this life. Whether it's a good friend or our spouse or partner, our brother or sister, mom or dad, or a grandparent. When somebody leaves us or dies, it can be kind of a lonely feeling. And that's what happened to Jesus and his disciples. Jesus is trying in the gospel lesson for today to prepare his followers for the fact that he's not going to be around much longer. And he tells them, he says, if you love me, and if you keep my commandments, that's the best way to keep my spirit alive. And then he said, I will not leave you alone. I'm going to leave you an advocate. And that advocate is going to be the Spirit of truth. I'm wondering, in your life, who is your advocate? Who sticks up for you? Who stands by you? Who gives you strength and hope to face each day when maybe you don't feel like you can do it by yourself? And what happens when that advocate leaves you and that person is no longer there? I know a lot of you are ruggedly independent, and I think of myself as ruggedly independent. But everybody, each one of us needs people that stand by us and stand for us, who can pick us up when we lose that sense of self-confidence that we so much depend on. And maybe that advocate is the Spirit of truth. You know how it is in life. We go along and we're independent and things kind of go the way we think they will, and you see somebody who can't do it by themselves and you say, that's never going to happen to me. And then you get sick. Or maybe you lose your job. Or maybe you start forgetting stuff and Alzheimer's creeps in. And then we need somebody that's going to stick up for us. We need somebody to hold us up when we're weak. And that's our advocate. And then there are times when that advocate has got to be you. When somebody looks up to you to give them the strength because they can't do it by themselves. And Jesus says, I may be gone, but my Spirit is going to live on in you. When you love somebody, it's like I love somebody. When you give unto somebody else, it's like I give unto somebody else. When you stand up for somebody who cannot stand up for themselves, it's like I'm doing it. And I think that's kind of what the church needs to be. I don't know exactly what the church means to each one of you. Somehow, some way, I always hope that what we do here in this humble place on LaGrange Road does make a difference, that maybe you carry a hunk of the Spirit of this place with you when you move into Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. I keep thinking all the time. I think about our church. I worry about our church. What does it stand for? What is it that makes us unique, if there's anything? Well, anyway, last week, a couple of guys, senior guys from Sandburg, come by my office. Now, I've never met them before, but they, of course, know lots of people in the church. Everybody does. And they said, Pastor Borling, we have a problem. And I said, what's your problem? Well, we're seniors and we need 24 hours of community service. Now, how hard is it in 4 years of high school to get 24 hours of community service? If you are a member of this church, you get 24 hours just by breathing in this building. So they sit in my office and they say, well, I said, how many more hours do you need? And they say, 17. So you've done 7 hours of community service in your 3.8 years at Sandburg. And when do you need them by? Well, Tuesday. And I'm thinking about, am I going to be the Wicked Witch? Or am I going to be Glenda? Or some mixture of the two? I'm not sure if I'm a sucker or who I am. But I brought him to the kitchen. I brought him to the garden. I said, you better come back tomorrow. And I said, we do Lutheran math, which is 2 for 1. And they got it done. But isn't that what life is about? To maybe open the door and make it possible? And then a lady calls me yesterday. She said, Pastor Don, you baptized my other 3 kids. I said, yes. And we had a 4th child. Would you baptize my child? And I said, of course. And I said, by the way, I'm in one of those moods. I said, you live in Tinley Park, which is just down the road. I baptized 3 of your kids. You want me to baptize your 4th? Is it possible you might come to church on a Sunday morning? And she laughed and felt a little bit guilty. And I said, well, that's a start. Guilt is a good thing. But is that who we are? That kind of mixture of the wicked witch and the good witch, just being human and opening the door, hoping that somehow, some way, as long as it takes, that those seeds can be planted. So I walk into the bank the other day, and the manager comes out, and she said, Reverend Borling, can I talk to you? And I said, sure. She said, you might remember this, but she said it was 15 years ago. I'm not sure if that's exactly true. She said there was a Sandberg student who took his own life. And when that happened, my son was going through a really, really bad time. And she said, I remember how your church, when that happened, you opened the doors to that family. And people like my son came to your church that night and worshiped. And he came back the next time. Well, my son lives in Colorado now, and for some reason last week he told me on the phone, whenever you see that church, will you thank them for doing that? Because through that experience, somehow, some way, my life was turned around. And I never said thank you for that. And she said, do you know the family? And I said, do I know the family? They're here every Sunday. And I said, the main thing is that they took that horrible experience, and instead of walking the other way, they stood up and talked to people about what it's like. I said, what happened 15 years ago changed my life and the church's life forever. She said, really? I said, yeah, that's what it's all about. You see, we all need an advocate. And you don't need to go to school to be an advocate. You don't need to go to seminary or graduate school. You just got to be yourself. Got to be human. You got to be honest with your own spirit and your own soul. It's like there are times when we're that mixture of the wicked witch and the good witch all at the same time. I often think that the church gets in the way of itself. I think of how pure Jesus was and how unpure the church can be. I had a wedding here on Friday. I'm not sure what the point of all these stories is, but bear with me. I had a wedding here and I love communion. I'm thinking of doing it twice a week on Sunday, if you don't mind. Oh, stop it, I won't. And so the bride loves communion, Merle did, and her husband is from Guatemala, Jose, and his whole family likes communion. And so after I did their vows and the rings, everybody sat down and I said, everyone here is welcome to come to the altar. You don't have to, but you're welcome to. And you could just see people look at each other because they go, is it okay? Do I need permission? Do I have to go like this when I come up here? And it was just kind of like that uneasy feeling I thought people would skip and jump to the altar because you're invited. It's unconditional love. And I contrast that to Friday night. Hector had an overnight with his, why Hector does this with 5th and 6th graders, I don't know, but he had this overnight. And he wanted me to come and share communion with the kids. And so Peggy and I came here about 9 o'clock. And we walk into the gym, and the kids are in a circle around candles, and they're talking. And I had a bottle of wine and a chalice and a loaf of bread, and the kids saw that bread and wine, and they just ran up to us and hugged us and said, can I help with communion? I'll help you with the wine. I'll help you with the bread. Can I break the bread? I say, you got to go to seminary for that. But, And it was just the raw joy of these 5th and 6th graders coming to celebrate the Lord's Supper. And that's kind of the way it needs to be. That sharing of the gifts in the Spirit of Jesus when He gives us that unconditional love. In closing, just to show you how silly religion can be, and I'm part of that sometimes, one of my grizzled buddies at the Riv passed away last week. And he's like a really non-church, non-going Catholic. And so in honor of that, they had a mass for his funeral. And the night before, his wife calls me and says, Don, would you be willing to say a few words at the funeral mass? She said, you'll have to do it at the end, because that's where they put Lutherans, But she said, I'd like you to say a few words. And so I go to the wake, and the funeral director, who I've known for years, introduces me to the priest and tells, well, Pastor Borling's going to say a few words. You could just tell the priest was totally unexcited about my participation in the mass. Well, anyway, I show up for the mass. People are lined up to go into the church, and I've got my dress blue jeans on and a sport coat, and just as I'm ready to walk in for the service, the priest goes, "Come here." And I said, "What did I do wrong? I haven't even spoken yet." He said, No, I lost my voice. I said, "I need you to read the gospel and do the homily." And I look over at the funeral director, he goes, "Yes!" I realized religion is religion. We're all in this together. I gave the priest a big hug after the service, and now we're like best friends, But I realized none of that stuff has to divide us. Because when it comes to being an advocate, there's only one name, and it's called openness. And that openness comes alive when goofs like you and me open our hearts unto somebody else. Amen. We'll continue with the creed. It's on page 105. If you're able to, please rise.